this simple trick, they'll all call you a hero. Two opposite sides.
Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be talking about integers or sign numbers. So this is your first video of the year, so let me just tell you a little bit about how it works. The expectation is as you're watching this video, you have your notes in front of you, and the notes in front of you would look exactly like what you see on your screen. So as Ms. Kearney is explaining, my expectation is that you are following along with the notes on your sheet in front of you, and anything that I write down, you are also writing down. If you have a question, you can always pause the video at any time and make a note of your question so you can ask me or Miss Maney tomorrow in class. Okay, so right now we're getting ready to get started. My expectation again is anything I write down, you are writing down and you're really listening and understanding. Okay, so we're going to be talking about signed numbers, meaning numbers that have signs like positive and negative. And then we're going to be comparing and finding the absolute value of integers. So before we get started, go ahead and write your name on the top of your paper and write entry number 1. This is your first entry in your new table of contents. So I'm going to write entry number 1 and then take just a moment and read your learning goals. That's right. Go ahead and read those learning goals you see in front of you. Okay, so my expectation is by the end of today, guys, you should be able to tell me what in the world is an integer and be able to tell me what is the absolute value and how to find it. Okay, so these are basically set up like Cornell notes. You can fill in anything as I write on the right side, and then the left side is kind of the key ideas and the questions of what we're going through. So our first key idea is what is an opposite. So if I told you what is the opposite of 5, what would you probably say? That's right, negative 5. Or if I said, what's the opposite of negative 7, what would you say? 7. So what makes those numbers opposites? Numbers that are opposite are numbers the same distance from 0 on a number line, but they're on the other side of 0. So for instance, when we said 5 and negative 5, we have a number line. 0's in the middle. We've got 5 on the right side and negative 5 on the left side. Okay, they're the same distance from 0, but on opposite sides. So think of some other opposites. What are some other opposites? Maybe negative 23 and positive 23. What is the opposite of 0? 0. 0 is its own opposite. Okay, next, our next essential question is, what is an integer? Well, you heard in the video, what did you hear the guy say? He said, integers are whole numbers to the negative, positive, or 0. If you master this simple trick, they'll all call you a hero. So integers are the set of whole numbers. Okay, that's really important. An integer is not a fraction. It's not a decimal. It is a whole number. Okay, so it's a set of whole numbers and their opposites. And we just talked about what opposites are. So give me some whole numbers that you can think of. 7, 10, 11. Basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We could keep going on and on. But we said it's the set of whole numbers and their opposites. So if we were to make a list, what I can do is I can do this little squiggly. This means the set of. And I'll do dot, dot, dot to show they could keep going. And so we could have negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, dot, dot, dot. They could keep going. So integer is a what kind of number? A whole number. So what would a non-example of an integer be? What would be an example of something that's not an integer? That's right, a decimal or maybe even a fraction. So now let's talk about what if we were wanting to find and talk about where in the world you would see real life integers in the real world. Where would you see integers in the real world? Where would you see positive and negative whole numbers? Just take a minute and think about that. For me, one of the first things that comes to mind is temperature. Temperature can be positive, and sometimes I don't like it, but sometimes it can be negative. But remember, it's got to be a whole number. Okay? Also, elevation. If you're on a really tall mountain, you might have a positive elevation, and then sometimes when you go down a valley, you have a negative elevation. Okay? Other examples might be in your bank account. If you just got paid and you've been saving your money, then you maybe have a positive bank account. And hopefully never, but sometimes when we borrow money and we have to borrow money from someone to buy something, that means we're in debt, so that would be a negative bank account, okay? Or, for example, and when you're talking about bank account, if you deposit money, meaning you put money in, it's positive. But if you take money out of the bank account, say you withdraw, it would be negative. So those are just some examples of where you might see integers in the real world. All right. So now let's talk about something called absolute value. So we can find the absolute value of an integer. And exactly what is absolute value? So our next key idea. What in the world does absolute value mean? You guys may have learned about this in 6th grade. So does anyone have a clue of what absolute value is? So absolute value is a number's distance from 0 on a number line. So if I said, how far is 3 from 0, how many spaces would you have to jump to get from 3 to 0? 3. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. So let's talk about this word distance for a second. Please note that distance can never be negative. Distance is always, always, always positive. So if we're finding the absolute value of something, we're finding its distance, which means it has to be positive. So that's really, 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 really important. We can actually go ahead and box this right in. Absolute value is always going to be positive. It's always going to be what? Positive. And why is it always positive? Because it's measuring a number's distance from 0, and distance is always positive. So, for example, the absolute value of negative 10, okay? So if we're trying to find the absolute, and these lines, guys, when you see the lines like this that I just put beside, you read that the absolute value of, okay? Can you say the absolute value of? So the absolute value of negative 10. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is how far is negative 10 from 0 on the number line? Well, negative 10, how many places would you have to jump to get to 0? You'd have to jump 10, so it's positive 10. Remember, absolute value is always, always, always positive, okay? What's the absolute value of 13? How far is 13 from 0? Its distance from 0 is 13. Remember, it's always positive, okay? So we're going to take just a minute. We're going to go through a few practice problems, and then you guys are going to have a chance to practice a little bit tomorrow, more tomorrow in class, okay? So we're going to jump down here to, let's say, number 1. So the directions say graph each integer and its opposite on a number line. So the integer is 5. What's the opposite of 5? Negative 5. So if we're graphing that on a number line, where does 0 go? In the middle. And then 5 is positive 5. Can you remember which direction you go for positive or negative? Positive is always on the right. So we're going to go up to positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then negative 5, so remember on the opposite side, same distance from 0, just 5 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And now, like I said, I'm gonna skip over some of this practice here in the middle, and you guys are gonna get to do that tomorrow in class. So I'm gonna come down here to practicing with using absolute value. So you see that there's lines beside 7. That's meaning what is the absolute value of 7? The absolute value of 7 is how far is 7 from 0 on a number line. So if you were to jump, how far would you have to move to get from 7 to 0? You'd have to move 7 places. So the absolute value of 7 is 7. Okay, next one, absolute value of -5. How far would you have to jump to get from -5 to 0? What is -5's distance from 0? +5. All right, and then I'm going to take just a second, and I'm going to look over on the right-hand side, and I want you to come over where it says mixed practice, and I'm going to look at this section right here, number 4. Okay, and it tells me to compare using less than, greater than, or equal to. So if I look at A, it's telling me to compare the absolute value of -3 and 2. So I actually need to solve, what's the absolute value of -3? So how far is -3 from 0? It's 3. And then compare that to 2. So which number is greater? 3. So I'm going to do 3 is greater than 2. Okay? So just to recap, we have talked about what is an opposite. And we said opposites are numbers that are the same distance from 0 on a number line, just on opposite sides of 0. We also talked about what is an integer. Remember, we said integers are whole numbers and they're opposites. And then finally, we talked about absolute value. And remember, absolute value is a number's distance from 0 on the number line. And distance is always, always, always what? Positive. So absolute value is also always positive. Okay? So right now, you have finished with your notes. And you don't have to look, you don't have to do any more practice. If you want to jump ahead and kind of look at some, you can, but you're going to go over this tomorrow in class. So right now, all you have to do is make sure you filled in the notes that we did on the video and you are good to go. But what I'd like for you to do before you finish is I want you to write down one thing you learned and one question you still have. So when you come to class tomorrow, you should have one thing you learned and a question you might still have, okay? And if you need to go back right now and rewatch the video, you can always go back and watch it again. Watch it as many times as you need. Because remember, we learned faster doesn't mean what? Smarter. So if you need to watch it again and see it slower, that's fine. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have when I see you in class. All right, guys. Good job. Make me proud. Peace out, Rainbow Trout. Love you, mean it.